Hello, I'm Dr. J.R. Reagan, and I'm going to talk today about Korea and the 2030 new untaxed economy. Here in Korea, it's been affected by the pandemic, just like all over the world. And so there's a new notion now of this untaxed economy, of being able to transact and do business without ever having a human interaction. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, and hopefully it'll be useful to you. It's certainly a big trend here where I am in South Korea. So first, a little bit about me. I have been in venture capital and startups for quite a long time, run my own company, Idea Explorer Global. I'm an advisor to a few venture capital firms as well. And before that, I was a chief technology officer twice, had two successful exits of companies, and in fact, one initial public offering. So that kind of gives me a background in the venture capital and startup world. But I've also been a part of the consulting business as well, and with Deloitte as a retired chief information security officer globally, and many different industries around the world, finance and government, and some of those things. But I also transitioned into academia, and that was one of my last roles was vice dean at a university here in Korea, and also being a professor at Johns Hopkins and Columbia. So all that says, it gives me a wide background in looking at this new economy and new business models that will really impact us in the fourth industrial revolution. So we're going to see where those worlds interact. So what is this untaxed economy? Untaxed is really kind of a new word. It brings together this notion of no contact. It's also being used in another word called ontact, which is online contact. But COVID-19 or the pandemic has changed every aspect of life, certainly here in Korea. And 85% of South Koreans really expect an increase in this contactless operations in whatever industry they interact with. So this untaxed movement, it's really minimizing contact between people, and it's causing the home to be the center of life, which is really interesting. And we can kind of see a chart here on the right of some of the trend in 2020 here, the increase in contact consumption across the age groups, but in particular in the 40s, 40-year-olds. But it really says that this digital life is taking over, and the untaxed economy and how people interact with industries is really coming to life. So untaxed services, you would think that, well, the distance would lead to less satisfaction. It's actually quite the opposite. User satisfaction in a recent survey is actually quite high across all the categories that you see here in delivery and food and beverage, and particularly in financial services even. We'll see an example of that as we go along here. But it's interesting that untaxed services does not mean dissatisfaction. In fact, it's the opposite. And so people are paying attention to this as they look towards how do we bring these new models to these industries, because it's important people expect that. So let's go into a few of these business models in those industries I just highlighted. Well, one of the first ones is in delivery, and here it's a government agency. The Korea Post is taking AI, artificial intelligence, and self-driving vehicles, autonomous vehicles, for that last mile, last kilometer delivery, in being able to bring all those packages. If you're doing a lot of business and transactions online, you got to get those packages to that center, right, to that home. The future vision of the Korean Post is an automated self-driving mobile post office, and being able to still have the physical goods delivered, but in a way that minimizes the interaction between people, for efficiency, but also for those things like pandemic. It's at a time when concerns are being raised about the transmission of the virus, the demand for untaxed services is growing, and we even see that with services provided by the government. Another interesting untaxed case study is one in the food and beverage, and doing more social distancing, that keeping humans away from each other through a safe distance so it doesn't transmit the virus. But doing that through the use of robotics. In this particular system, it's right here in my home city in Korea, Daejeon. The system that was put in place by this cafe needed no input from people from order to delivery. Of course, what it really means is no human interaction. People would order their drinks. It was processed through a kiosk, and it would only take about 7 minutes to make those drinks, which is actually pretty good, pretty fast. The only human employee at this two-story cafe was a patissier who also has cleaning duties and refilling ingredients. And actually, the cafe was redesigned to make sure there was efficiency of the robot getting around. But it's interesting that the food and beverage industry now is being impacted too by this untaxed movement, and done in creative ways. Financial services, it's always interesting to me how this would work. It's about trust, it's about money, it's about advice. And traditional face-to-face meetings are giving way to online. Machines are the new advisors. Artificial intelligence, what we say is the API, the Application Programming Interface, is able to encapsulate what advisors traditionally have been given as human advice. And there's actually quite a wide range of artificial intelligence chatbots that can chat with the customer and give advice without the interaction and intervention of humans. YouTube videos, smartphone apps, even using all of this for recruiting, getting new customers. So back to this, how about the satisfaction of this? Well, actually, the studies are finding out, at least here in Korea, that clients give more favorable reviews regarding video messages rather than text messages, as they're easier to watch and understand. So I can do it on my time. I can do it. I can watch it again. I can listen. And it's very personalized to me, but it doesn't require a human being. And interesting too, so that's on the service side, but the market is also rewarding untaxed themed stocks also. Those stocks which are using untaxed for better service. And so the market is rewarding that in telecommuting. Now these are examples are here in Korea. Online education, e-commerce, gaming. So they're getting multiples in the market by having that piece which has been successful in the untaxed economy. So the financial services is doing that well in various ways. If we look at retail, Korea online sales are growing rapidly, in fact outpacing offline, outpacing the in-store during this coronavirus period. In May of this year in Korea, retail sales were about 9.6 billion. That's up 19% from the same period last year. And in the history of tracking this metric, it's the highest amount. So here we've had a pandemic, we've had an impact in something that really has been seen as a traditional in-store experience, and now the offline experience is outpacing that. For the first time, it's been tracked since 2001. And here you can see some of those categories that are really jumping off the charts: groceries, life and health, books, albums, sports. All those categories are really doing very well in the case of retail. So again, it goes to experience. It goes to, can this be successful, and will it be successful? And we're seeing just in a compressed short amount of time it being very successful, particularly in retail. And here's some more metrics of that and the Korea online shopping transactions. And interesting too, and not just the food delivery services jumping up, but the consumers in their 20s and 30s really see it's unnecessary to have interpersonal relationships and prefer using digital devices in particular categories. So we saw earlier the 40-year-olds are really using um, uh, on-tact and untacked transactions, and the 20 to 30-year-olds are really using their digital native experience as a preference for the platform for this as well. Transportation, I think this is kind of an interesting example as well. We often think of transportation like we saw before, the vehicles, autonomous vehicles, but similar to autonomous driving, which is carried out in sort of a flat space, elevator technology is actually the most used vertical transportation. So we're starting to see really innovations here in a kind of a physical way for untacked, and we're seeing foot buttons, so you don't have to actually touch the elevator, antiviral handrails, touchless buttons, even smart indicators and robotics being able to be used to call elevators, call the elevator down and bring it up, and so the elevator becomes autonomous in some ways with the use of robotics. So this vertical transportation is an interesting untacked case study, and we're starting to see this more in Korea also. So in summary, really this has been a pre-existing trend that's been forced to dramatically speed up because of the socio-economic impact. You know, the fancy words of saying, you know, the society responding to the economic necessities of not being able to transact in person is really being seen as a driver for this new untacked, on-tacked economy. And for these impacts that we see on the right, particularly driven by the pandemic, travel restrictions, impacts on in-person entertainment and hospitality, capital markets, particularly with financial services, and even looking at things that traditionally we've seen as human to human interactions, like recruiting and hiring, and consumer behavior, all being impacted and being driven by this new trend we're seeing, which is the untacked economy. And so I wanted to give you a kind of a snapshot into what is happening here in Korea. You know, it started slowly in a few years ago, and really because of the pandemic was forced to accelerate. And we're starting to see some positive benefits out of this in economic terms, positive benefits in terms of lifestyle and social benefits. But it's also, I think the net of this is it's forcing new business models. And so we'll start to see that more, not just in Korea, but in other places, in other countries. And so I think we'll start to see this as sort of the next wave of business that we'll see driven through digital technology. So hopefully that was useful and certainly is interesting to watch here in Korea. Thank you.